Hello and welcome to another edition of The Advocate with Albert Abkarian, where we talk to politicians, entertainers, sports personalities. And today we have two very, very important guests with us, the District Attorney Jackie Lacey and a former District Attorney Robert Philibosian. Welcome and thank you for accepting our invitation to come to our show.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you, Robert. Ms. Lacey, if you can just tell me a little bit about your background so we know who Jackie Lacey is.
Right. So I was born and raised in LA. I'm an LA native. I grew up in the Crenshaw district. My mother and father moved here from the South in the 50s. And they raised my sister and I in the LA County, and I went to public school here, Dorsey High School, ended up going to UC Irvine and then on to USC Law School.
That's great. That's great. And you've lived here in LA the majority of your life.
Right, I've lived here the majority of my life. I've worked in LA all of my life. I was, before running for DA in 2012, I actually started working at the DA's office in 1986.
Wow. Wow. You know everything about the DA's office if somebody wants some history going back to 1986. Mm-hmm. And then everyone knows who Robert Philibosian is, my mentor, a guy who I've looked up to for over 30 years or more maybe. Everyone knows who you are, Robert, in the community, but why don't you just give us a little bit of background about Robert Philibosian?
Well, I was the district attorney at one time. I started off as a deputy DA, as did District Attorney Lacey. I think maybe one of the high points I've had is to watch her career from her first days as a deputy DA, growing through the ranks, being chief deputy DA, and then finally being elected district attorney. But the unique thing about Jackie Lacey is that she has the dedication to serve the people. And to me, that's very, very important. She's the one who goes into the courtroom, who has gone into the courtroom as a deputy DA in the most difficult kinds of cases, murders, double murders, and convicted people, and kept the street safe for the rest of us.
That's great. Again, I'm assuming that that's a very high endorsement for Jackie Lacey by Robert Philibosian, a former district attorney.
I endorsed Jackie Lacey in her first race for district attorney, her second race for district attorney, and I'm doing it again with great pleasure and enthusiasm.
Thanks. Great. I wanted to ask you a question about what was the most difficult thing you had when you first took office. So this goes back to almost 7 years ago, with your experience.
Right. You know, I'd had an opportunity to work very closely with the former District Attorney Steve Cooley, and you sometimes think that you understand what the job is about just by watching. But the truth of the matter is very different when it's actually your name on the front door of the office and you're responsible for so much that happens. And I think the first challenge I faced was a triple homicide, just figuring out how to explain that to the public, what we were going to do, and how to go forward with prosecuting that very, very challenging case. And we were very successful, but it took a while. But that was the first challenge was, you know what, when you're a deputy DA, you might be assigned to some cases. When you're the elected DA, all of the cases belong to you.
Yeah, and that's a very, very, very big, I mean, you really are making a life and death decisions, unlike some other people.
Right, but it's great work, Albert. I mean, I originally got into this office thinking that, okay, I'm going to be a trial lawyer. And I was a trial lawyer for many, many years. I tried over 100 cases to jury. And I loved it. I enjoyed getting a case from the beginning, interacting with victims, witnesses, police officers, and bringing justice to the people. But when you're in charge of the largest office in the nation, you're not the one going to court. You're the one who empowers others and equip others to go to court. And you hire people, and you have to hire the right people, and you have to set the right policy, the right tone, have the right attitude, lead by example. It's an exciting job, but a job where there's a lot of responsibility.
I agree with you, and it's a very, very difficult job. I wouldn't want to have it because I want to be able to go home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and not worry about things. Let me ask you a question. one of the first female DAs, one of the first African American female district attorneys. How does that? You have to carry a bigger burden. How do you see yourself representing, being in the community?
Right. So I don't see it as a burden. I see it as a responsibility.
That's what I
Being
meant
the
to say.
first woman, I'm the first woman since the office was created in 1850, and the first African American. And I want to make sure that the mark I leave on that office is that the justice system should be fair and balanced, but that we should also pay attention to make sure that all communities are safe. In my opinion, I'm responsible for making sure that kids in underserved communities are just as safe as those who may be able to live in affluent societies. And quite frankly, I see this as I want to be the best. I am competitive, and no offense to Bob, but I want to be the best because I'm sure he felt the same way. I want to do the job. I'm a human being. I wake up every morning and wanting to come into the office and think and figure out how can we do things better? How can we make the justice system work better to protect the public?
And for it to treat
Right.
everyone equally.
Correct.
And treat everyone the way they should
Correct.
be treated, regardless of if you're an entertainer or if you're coming from wherever you're coming from.
Absolutely. I mean, people should know that the way we treat all victims that come through our justice, through our office, is we support them. We make sure that no matter whether you're right, whether you're famous or not, that you know that you're important to us, that we're going to defend your rights, we're going to make sure that your rights are safeguarded, that we're going to make sure that you're supported, and we understand that it's very, very difficult to be a victim of a crime. And depending upon what kind of crime it is, if it's a violent crime, it's life-altering and life-changing.
Right. Talking about victims of the crime. Somebody is involved in a crime, either filed or unfiled. There are actually resources that the district attorney's office has for those victims. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Right. So we have our own in-house budget, but we also, victims of crime are also entitled to funds from the state, but they have to apply for them. And we assist people in filling out that paperwork to make sure that they get it. So people should know, let's say you are the victim of a violent crime, you're able to actually call our victim services representatives, and we have, more than 100. I've doubled them since I've been DA. But we have them available to help you and assist you in filling out the paperwork, getting compensation. Sometimes it's for funeral services. Sometimes our victims, when they come to court, they can't even afford to have lunch, and we're able to provide those kind of services for them, as well as assist them with counseling services or anything like that. So just because it's unsolved doesn't mean that they can't apply for services, and so they should know that. And on our website, there's a link to our victim services representatives.
And if somebody is a victim of violent crime, they would just call that number. There would be someone that would assist them, and they can maybe even personally meet with those people?
Correct. I mean, the first step is you've got to file a police report, and because chances are you'll need that police report in order to get services. But yeah, we help a lot of people where there's no defendant, in the sense that it's unsolved, but we're there to make sure, we're the only agency that's really there to make sure that victims of crime are treated with humanity.
That's incredible. That's good for the viewers to know, and it's a very important thing for the viewers to know. I want to ask you something, Robert, about DA Jackie Lacey. You've seen her now in action for 7 years. What has been the biggest change you've seen on Jackie Lacey in the past 7 years?
Well, I've seen her grow from a rock'em sock'em prosecutor, putting bad guys in jail, to an all-embracing public servant for the entire county of Los Angeles, who sets a fantastic example for the deputies in the office, because every single deputy DA going into a courtroom, whether it's a drunk driving case or a death penalty murder case, knows that their DA has been there in those same courtrooms prosecuting the same kinds of cases. And the guidance that they get from her and the support and encouragement that they get from her comes from someone who has been in their shoes prosecuting those cases. And that's very, very important.
Great. Thank you. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back. We're still here again talking to current District Attorney Jackie Lacey and former District Attorney Robert Philibosian. District Attorney Jackie Lacey, I want to ask you a question that I asked Robert Philibosian about you. What have you seen the difference in the District Attorney in the past since you've taken over the office?
Right. So there have been a lot of challenges. You have to remember, since I took over as District Attorney, the 3 strikes law has been moderated. We've had the marijuana has been legalized. Prop 47 has passed, which reduced drug crimes from a felony to a misdemeanor. Some petty thefts are no longer petty thefts because the rate has been changed. We've been in a criminal justice reform mode for quite some time. And responding to all of these changes has been my job as District Attorney, instructing my DAs how to go about correcting these or doing these changes. But also I have to pay attention to crime and safety in the neighborhood and make sure that as we implement these changes, we don't forget about people who have to be safe and who have to live in LA County. And so that really is the hallmark of what I've seen. There have been more changes probably in the last 7 years than there have been in the 17 years before that. A lot of things, and voters are voting for things sometimes and they don't necessarily know what they're all about, but you know, we get those laws and we have to make sure that people are safe. And also there's been an increase in cybercrime. That has really taken off. Nowadays your computer is probably one of the least safest places to be, right? Because people can hack into your bank account and do all of these kind of things. So we've done an educational campaign to warn people about all of these cyber intrusions, scams, and we've actually helped the County of LA solve and disrupt some cyber intrusions. So that's the biggest thing. People need to know that while you still have violent crime on the street, the internet, your computer, your phone, those are places where you're probably more likely than you realize to be the victims of crime.
You know, I have first-hand knowledge of that, coming to work one day, looking at every computer in the office, and somebody asking me to give them 50,000 in Bitcoin so they can release my data in my computer. So I know exactly, you feel very violated, you feel very upset, but there's things that you can do in the office to protect yourself.
Right, I mean, you've got to be aware. I always say when you're in front of your phone or your computer, just pause. Think about it. Somebody's asking for your password. Don't ever give them that information. Don't ever give your social security number to anyone. Lately we've discovered a vulnerability that we didn't know existed. When people go to the airport, sometimes you'll see a USB port, a public USB port, and you think, oh, my cell phone is low. I might as well charge it in there. Well, that turns out to be a very vulnerable area where people can get information from your phone if you charge it using a USB port. So bring your own portable charger, or there are devices you can get that will protect you from those kinds of intrusions.
That's interesting. Let's talk about elderly abuse. It's an important issue. Some of the parents are now in elderly houses, and people really don't know what they should do if they feel like there's elder abuse. What do you recommend?
You know, all of us are heading that way, right? That's the way I look at it. And it's good to designate somebody in your family that you trust, who you can call to make decisions or help you make decisions before they happen. Because what happens is with a lot of elderly people, they're so trusting. And someone comes along and pays them a little bit of attention or tells them that, hey, I can help you get more money. Or they call you up on the phone and say, your grandson's in jail, don't tell anybody, but wire a certain amount of money. And these are things that we see over and over again. And my mom, she is the mom of the district attorney, and I warn her about these things all the time, and yet she was vulnerable. She was actually told to wire money to help get my nephew out of jail, and luckily we got the money back, but it reminded me of how vulnerable our seniors are. So if you have a senior in your life, stop in on them, check on them, see what's going on. Listen into any conversation they might be having with a stranger or with a relative who's down on their luck, and make sure you protect them. And for seniors, you have to remember that people will tell you almost anything to try to get your hard-earned money. And so find some relative that you trust that you can call and say, hey, what do you think about this? And that's the way you protect yourself. Prevention is the way you protect yourself.
That's great. Well, you're in campaign mode. Campaign 2020. Everyone is in a campaign mode, it seems like. Who is your opponent, and how are you different than your opponent? And I'll ask this from Mr. Philibosian. So what do you think differentiates you from the your opponent?
Well, there are a couple of people in the race. A public defender is running to take over the DA's office. And there is a person from the outside, from San Francisco, who moved down here after being the district attorney of San Francisco, and in a matter of a week filed to run to challenge me. And what I want people to know is a couple things. First of all, we all know that San Francisco is not LA, right? That LA,
thank God.
That LA, we are much more concerned about public safety. We believe in fair justice, but we also want to make sure that the quality of life here does not deteriorate. But the biggest challenge is the person who's running has ideas, but the ideas really don't take into account your safety. They're more about what can we do to let more people out of jail, to let more people escape punishment. And I believe in reform, but I think you ought to be a reasonable reformer, and that's really the difference. Reasonable reform means you think it through. You figure out what crimes we need to lessen the punishment, and ones where we need to say, no, these are our standards and this is where we're going to hold people to, because we don't want our crime rates to go back up. We don't want people hurt. We want to maintain our quality of life here in LA County.
Well, you know, usually when you have an opponent, they come in and they talk about things that you've done wrong. And your opponent is going to have a hard time talking about things you've done wrong in this county. You're very well liked.
Thank you.
Everyone talks nothing but good things about you. So
Thank
it's going to
you.
be a very difficult race for them. Mr. Philibosian, what do you think differentiates DA Jackie Lacey from the opponents?
She's been a courtroom prosecutor, and they haven't. One is a public defender. The other was the appointed DA in San Francisco, who never ever saw the inside of a courtroom as a lawyer. And these people think they can run the DA's office in LA. They can't do it. It's significant that DA Lacey is supported by a wide variety of people in Los Angeles. Everyone from criminal defense attorneys to the Deputy DA's Association to police organizations to labor unions, many elected officials from both parties very, very strongly have supported her. And interestingly enough, her opponent from San Francisco, the mayor of San Francisco, endorsed Jackie Lacey for District Attorney of Los Angeles. Someone who had personal experience with the person who was the DA in San Francisco. The city attorney in San Francisco, who had personal experience with the person who was the DA in San Francisco, guess what? Endorsed Jackie Lacey for District Attorney of Los Angeles County. So the people who know her opponent best have endorsed Jackie Lacey.
That's great. That's great. Well, just so we put it on the record, I'm a very big fan, and I've always said that I'm endorsing Jackie Lacey. I think that you probably be the best person for the job, and I think that is having a cable show. I don't have to do anything else, but I can go ahead and give you an endorsement. It's going to be a tough race. I ask everyone out there to go out there. The first thing is for you to vote, and the second thing is to look at the differences between the district attorneys. Look at what Jackie Lacey has done, and then go ahead and make up your own mind. But if you ask me, I think you should vote for Jackie Lacey. Jackie Lacey, thank you very much for inviting our invitation. And Robert Philibosian, thank you for coming into our show.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon.